All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're going deep, deep into a case that really shook Detroit, the crimes of Deangelo Martin.
Oh, yes.
He was active between 2018 and 2019 and really just preyed on some of the city's most vulnerable people and left a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah.
So we've been going through a ton of material. We've got court records, we've
Okay.
got news reports, we've even dug into some background on Wikipedia,
Hmm.
just trying to put this whole thing together. And one of the things that we keep coming back to is this. Martin would pose his victims in these really disturbing ways and take a sock from each one.
Oh, wow.
Why? That's a question we're hoping to get some answers to by the end of this deep dive.
It is, it's a perplexing detail.
Yeah,
It really is. It suggests a level of control,
yeah,
maybe a psychological need that goes beyond the crimes themselves.
right.
Yeah.
It's not just about the act.
It's not just about the acts.
It's about something more.
Exactly.
So, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's start at the beginning. So, Deangelo Martin was born in Detroit in
Okay.
1985, and his early life was marked by poverty and exposure to crime, kind of, unfortunately typical for that area.
Right.
But it seems like there was a real turning point when he was a teenager. 1998, his mother, Chantrines Barker,
Okay.
was sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping and murder.
Wow.
I mean, that's
That's huge.
a lot to deal with
Yeah.
as a young person.
Especially as a teenager.
As a teenager,
To
right.
process that, yeah.
Trying to figure out the world.
That's profound trauma
Yeah.
for a young person. Still developing their understanding of the world.
Right.
Um, there is a lot of research that connects early childhood trauma
Yeah.
to an increased risk of criminal behavior later in life.
We hear that a lot.
You do, and it's not a direct link, of course,
Right.
but it can have a really significant impact
Yeah.
on emotional development, impulse control, even forming healthy relationships
Right.
down the line. So,
So how does that, you talk about that not being a direct link, but his high school years seem to have been pretty normal, relatively normal, I guess.
Okay.
He graduated from Kettering High School, 2003. There are even reports that he attended Wayne University for a bit.
Huh.
So was he leading a double life?
Oh, it's a common misconception that serial killers fit a specific profile.
Right, right.
The reality is much more nuanced.
Yeah.
They can be charming. They blend in. They seem completely ordinary.
Right.
In Martin's case, it makes you wonder if there are any signs,
Right.
any warning signs, any red flags that were missed.
Right.
People that,
Yeah.
knew him back then, did they ever suspect?
Right. Could they have known?
It's impossible to say for sure.
Yeah.
But it does highlight the challenges of trying to identify these potential offenders.
Right.
And it also kind of speaks to the need to just have a better, broader, more comprehensive understanding
Yeah.
of the factors that contribute to violent behavior. It's not just about catching the quote-unquote bad guys.
Right.
It's about preventing these tragedies from happening
Right.
in the first place.
So after his father's death, Martin lived with his grandparents, and he struggled to find stable employment. So it seems like he was facing, significant financial hardship, instability.
That's another common thread you see in a lot of serial killer cases. A
Really?
history of instability, social isolation, feelings of inadequacy.
Huh.
And these factors can create a breeding ground for resentment, desire for control, a need to assert power over others.
Right. So they're lacking control
Yeah,
in their own lives.
exactly.
And they're trying to find it
Yeah,
somewhere else.
yeah.
And that need for control might, be reflected in his choice of victims and locations. So his first known victim was Annette Nelson,
Okay.
found in February of 2018. And, tragically, her body was initially discovered by a homeless man who was trying to get her help.
Oh, wow.
And he was actually wrongly accused of her murder.
Oh, no.
Surveillance footage later cleared his name, but I mean,
It's
it's awful. It shows how vulnerable people
absolutely.
be misjudged,
Yeah.
even criminalized.
It's a tragic example of how societal biases
Yeah.
can lead to injustice.
Yeah.
Um, But going back to Nelson,
Right.
she was lured to an abandoned house, raped and strangled. And this became kind of Martin's MO, you know.
Mm,
This was this was his typical way of operating, you
right.
know, uh, targeting vulnerable women and using these abandoned properties as his kind of his hunting grounds.
Right. So he's deliberately choosing
Yeah.
these desolate locations. Why do you think that is?
Abandoned houses offer, you know, a sense of isolation, anonymity.
Uh,
But in Martin's case, I think it goes even deeper than that.
okay.
You know, think about the profound loss that he experienced in his own life.
Hmm.
You know, the loss of his mother to prison, the loss of his family home, the loss of stability.
Right.
These abandoned structures, I think, could represent um, his attempt to reclaim a sense of control.
Oh, okay.
You know, almost like a twisted mirror image of the home and family that he lost.
So it's like he's creating his own world
Exactly.
where he dictates the rules.
Yeah.
And he has all the power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And within that world,
Yeah.
he can act out these fantasies. He could exert a level of control that he lacks
Right.
in his real life.
Yeah. And it's within those abandoned houses that we see. This peculiar thing of the posing of the victims
Right.
and the taking of a sock
Right.
from each one.
Yeah, I think that detail speaks to um, a need that goes beyond just the crimes themselves.
Mm,
It can be a desire for a tangible reminder
okay.
of his control over the victims.
Right, right.
Or maybe even, you know, a way of dehumanizing them,
Oh, okay.
reducing them to objects that he can um, manipulate
Okay.
and possess.
So it's not just
So it's not random.
it's not random. It's a deliberate choice.
Right.
It's a way of asserting dominance.
Right. Dominance, yeah.
Precisely. And it's a disturbing thought, but I think it's really crucial
Yeah.
to understanding the psychology of this case.
Absolutely. So in March of
2019, Martin met Nancy Harrison, a 52-year-old woman. They did drugs together. And then following that same pattern, he lured her to an abandoned house, raped her, and brutally beat her to death.
you know, the drug use
Yeah.
is another element that we see in these cases.
Right.
It can, you know, lower inhibitions. It
Yeah.
can make it easier to manipulate
Right.
victims. And it can make victims more vulnerable.
Right.
You know, it's a tragic cycle
Yeah.
that often ensnares people struggling with addiction.
Right.
And it can make them easier targets
Right.
for predators like Martin.
Yeah. And then in April of 2019, another woman was found in an abandoned home. Her body was already decomposing. And sadly, this victim remains unidentified.
It's heartbreaking. You know, it highlights the fact that each of these victims was a person
Yeah.
with a life, a story, and people that loved them.
Right.
They were more than just statistics
Yeah.
in a case file.
In a case file, right.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get lost in the details,
Absolutely.
the facts.
Absolutely.
And forget that these were real people.
It's important to remember that.
Yeah.
You know, as we try to understand the mind of a killer,
Right.
we also have to remember to honor the memory of the victims.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. So in June of 2019, Martin claimed another victim, 55-year-old Tamara Jones. This time, the murder followed a failed rape attempt on another woman. So was his violence escalating?
You know, that escalating pattern, it is something that you often see
Yeah.
with serial offenders.
Yeah.
As they evade capture,
Right.
their sense of power and invincibility grows,
Yeah.
which can lead to more frequent and more brutal attacks.
Yeah.
So it's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the urgency of stopping these people as quickly as possible.
As quickly as possible, yeah.
Yeah.
So thankfully, there was one crucial detail that ultimately led to Martin's capture: used condoms
Oh, wow.
that he just left at the scene.
It's another common misconception that you know, serial killers are these criminal masterminds.
Right.
You know, often they're driven by compulsions,
Yeah.
a distorted sense of reality, and a belief that they are untouchable.
Right.
And this can lead to careless mistakes
Right.
that ultimately aid in their capture.
So these condoms were basically like breadcrumbs leading
Exact.
straight back to him.
Sometimes the smallest details
Yeah.
can make the biggest difference
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
bringing these people to justice.
Absolutely. But before we get to Martin's capture, there's another really crucial piece of the story we need to explore. And it's a piece that offers um, a glimmer of hope
Okay?
in this otherwise really, really dark.
You're talking about the survivor.
Yeah, because even as Martin was claiming victims, there was one woman who refused to become another statistic.
Hmm.
In May of 2019, a 26-year-old woman encountered Martin, and it seemed like she was going to meet the same fate.
Oh, wow.
But then something really incredible happened.
Yeah, her story is remarkable. She not only survived, but, she helped to put an end to Martin's, reign of terror.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even amidst such darkness, there are stories of, incredible courage and resilience.
She was invited back to his residence, and he attacked her. He raped her and stabbed her in the neck.
It's hard to fathom the terror she must have felt.
It really is, yeah.
Absolutely. But what's so powerful about her story is she didn't give up.
Right.
She fought back, and her struggle was heard by Martin's grandmother,
Wow.
who, bravely called the police.
Wow. So that
Yeah.
single phone call, I mean, that could have
It really is. It's
saved lives.
amazing to think about the ripple effect
Yeah.
of that one act of courage.
Absolutely. And thankfully, the police were able to apprehend Martin shortly after
Hmm.
at a Detroit bus stop in June of 2019.
Okay.
And, his capture not only prevented further harm, but it also helped to clear the homeless man
Right.
who had been wrongly accused of Annette Nelson's murder.
Yeah, yeah. A little bit of justice amidst a very tragic situation.
Right, right. It's almost poetic in a way that his capture brought some solace
Yeah,
to another victim of circumstance.
absolutely.
But even with Martin behind bars, the investigation was far from over. DNA evidence linked him to the 4 murders and the assaults.
Uh-huh.
But there was always that lingering question, could there be more victims?
That's a question that haunts every serial killer case.
Right.
And in Martin's case, the authorities, they went to extraordinary lengths
Yeah.
to find answers.
Right.
They searched over 3,000 abandoned houses
Wow.
in Detroit, trying to uncover any signs of additional victims.
Gosh,
It was a massive undertaking,
yeah.
really a grim testament to the potential scope of his crimes.
Yeah, 3,000 abandoned houses.
It's
That number is just, it's staggering.
It really is.
And it speaks to a broader issue, too, the problem of abandoned properties
Oh, yeah.
in cities like Detroit.
Absolutely. These vacant spaces, they can become breathing grounds for crime.
Yeah.
And they also reflect, deeper socioeconomic challenges.
Right, right.
They represent a failure of urban planning and a lack of investment in these struggling communities.
Right. It's like they create these pockets of vulnerability
Exactly.
where someone like Martin can operate with this chilling sense of impunity.
Precisely. And it's not talk about the immediate danger they pose.
Right.
It's also about the sense of neglect and despair they symbolize.
Yeah.
The way they erode the fabric of a community.
So while it's crucial to focus on catching the perpetrators, we also need to address these underlying issues, the systemic failures
Absolutely.
that contribute to these tragedies.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's about addressing the root causes, investing in communities,
Right.
creating a sense of hope and opportunity
Yeah.
that can help to prevent these crimes from happening in the first place.
There was one case in particular that stood out during the investigation,
Oh,
Deborah Reynolds. She was last seen with Martin, and sadly, her body was later found.
oh wow.
They couldn't definitively link him to her death,
Hmm.
but it does raise that possibility that she might have been another victim.
It's a haunting thought,
Yeah.
and it underscores the importance of thorough investigations,
Yeah.
even after an arrest has been made.
Right.
There's always the possibility of uncovering more victims, bringing a sense of closure to their families.
Right.
Um,
So with Martin behind bars, the focus shifted to the legal process. A psychological evaluation determined him to be sane and fit to stand trial.
okay.
But in 2022, he struck a plea deal.
Plea deals, they can be controversial,
Yeah.
especially in cases as serious as this.
Yeah.
Essentially, a plea deal is an agreement between the prosecution and the defense
Right.
where the defendant pleads guilty,
Right.
often to lesser charges in exchange for a reduced sentence.
Okay.
It can provide a, quicker resolution,
Right.
avoid the uncertainties of a trial.
Yeah.
But some argue that it allows perpetrators to escape the full weight of their actions.
Right. So in Martin's case, he pleaded guilty to 4 counts of murder and 2 counts of rape.
Okay.
In return, he received a sentence of 45 to 70 years in prison. So do you think that was a just outcome?
There's no easy answer to that question.
Right.
On the one hand, it ensures that he'll be incarcerated for, you know, a significant portion,
Right.
if not the entirety of his remaining life.
Right.
On the other hand, some might argue that it doesn't fully account for the gravity of his crimes
Yeah.
and the profound impact they had on the victims and their families.
Yeah, it's a complex issue.
Very much so.
And there are valid points, on both sides.
Absolutely.
But what struck me most about the trial coverage wasn't the legal arguments or the sentencing debate. It was the detail about the sock.
Right.
It kept coming up again and again.
You know, that seemingly insignificant detail, it really seemed to capture people's attention, didn't it?
It really did.
I think it speaks to our fascination with the psychology of these crimes. Our desire to understand what drives someone to commit such acts.
Yeah, and I think, while those rituals might be significant to him, I'm also struck by how random they seem.
Mm.
Does that tell us anything about his mental state?
It's possible. It could be a sign of a disorganized thought process.
Okay.
Or an attempt to create a sense of order and control.
Right.
In a world that felt very chaotic to him.
Mm.
It's something that forensic psychologists would likely explore in great depth.
Right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating and horrifying.
Absolutely.
At the same time.
It really is.
This need to understand the why
Yeah.
behind these crimes.
It's a natural human response, right?
Yeah.
We want to make sense of the senseless to find some explanation for the unexplainable.
Right.
But the truth is there may never be a satisfying answer.
Right. So we've covered a lot of ground here. A troubled childhood, a string of brutal murders, a controversial plea deal.
Yeah.
But in the final part of our deep dive, I want to shift our focus to something truly remarkable. The survivor.
Okay.
Her story is a beacon of hope amidst this darkness, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. It's hard to imagine the strength it might have taken to not only survive, but to come forward and help bring Martin to justice.
Her testimony played a vital role in securing his conviction.
Right.
And it's incredibly difficult for survivors of sexual assault to speak out.
Yeah.
Especially when they've endured such trauma.
Right.
There's often a fear of not being believed, of being blamed, or even, facing retaliation.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think about all those barriers that survivors face.
Absolutely.
When trying to seek justice.
There's definitely a need for systemic change,
Yeah.
for creating a more supportive and trauma-informed approach to handling these cases.
Right, right.
Survivors need to feel empowered to come forward,
Yeah.
knowing that they'll be treated with dignity and respect.
Absolutely. And her actions weren't just about her own case.
No.
By speaking out, she likely prevented countless other women
Exactly.
from becoming victims.
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
One act of courage can have these far-reaching consequences.
Right.
It can disrupt the cycle of violence.
Right.
And it can empower others to come forward.
Absolutely.
It sends a message that these perpetrators will be held accountable.
It does. It does. Her story is just, I don't know, such a powerful reminder.
Yeah.
That even in the darkest situations,
Yeah.
there's always hope.
Yeah.
And that even one voice can make a difference.
And I think that's the most important takeaway from this whole deep dive.
Hmm.
It's easy to get caught up in the darkness, the brutality, the seemingly senseless nature
Right.
of these crimes. But we can't forget that there's also strength.
Right.
There's resilience.
Yeah.
And there's a capacity for good that persists even in the face of evil.
Deangelo Martin's case is a stark reminder
Yeah.
of the vulnerability of women, particularly those struggling with poverty and addiction.
Right.
And it underscores the need for social safety nets, for addressing the root causes of crime, and just creating, a more just and equitable society.
I completely agree. We can't just focus on catching the perpetrators.
Right.
We need to address those systemic issues, the society failures that allow these tragedies to happen in the first place.
Right.
It's about creating a world where people feel safe,
Yeah.
supported, and empowered.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this deep dive has been quite a journey, through a very, very dark chapter in Detroit's history.
Yeah,
And, we've explored the complexities of the criminal mind, the devastating impact of trauma,
right.
and the importance of speaking out against injustice. But it's also been a journey of hope,
Hmm.
a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, the human spirit can endure and even triumph.
Well said. It's been a difficult case to unpack,
Yeah,
but I think we've gained some valuable insights
right.
along the way. And if there's one thing I hope listeners take away from this,
Yeah,
it's the understanding that we all have a role to play
right.
in creating a safer and more just world.
Absolutely. That's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
So, to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unsettling case of Deangelo Martin. We hope this has been informative, albeit challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember, even in the face of darkness,
Hmm.
there's always hope.
Keep those minds curious, and remember, there's always more to learn. 1044.